a society and culture that moves so fast, wisdom is something that moves quite slow.
So maybe we just need to be aware that if we're not careful, we'll dumb down so much our human knowledge because we've subcontracted it to machines. So don't let that happen.
There's a danger here as well that we can, and as business owners, if we're too reliant upon this technology, I think there is a real need to step back and apply some wisdom to going, okay, well, how far should we go with AI?
And that in a fast-moving, dynamic, technologically driven society, age is seen as a hindrance because they're not early adopters.
If we lose the ability to apply the knowledge in the right context, we've lost wisdom.
Here we go again.
Here we go again.
I never know what the first thing is to say. I said this a couple of episodes ago. I need to trigger you to say something. And I say, hello, or here we go again.
I'm normally the one that does the triggering, to be fair.
You are triggering. You're very triggering. Go on then, trigger.
Trigger.
What have you got? Any update on the bee workshops? You're going to do your evening courses?
Not
yet. Not booked on?
I've not booked on yet, no.
I do have an update on my stat last week.
Oh, yeah?
The bees or stars conundrum. Yeah. Apparently, experts estimate 100 billion stars in the Milky Way, and there are more bees in managed colonies alone on planet Earth.
That's a lot of bees.
100 billion.
There's something like every 1 in 5 bits of food that we eat have been touched by a bee, or not touched, but like pollinated or something. Pretty important.
Yeah, they get a bad rap, don't they?
Unbelievable. Do they get a bad rap?
Bees?
Wasps get a bad rap.
I think bees are sometimes...
Wasps deserve it, though, don't they?
What possible value do they? Do they not pollinate?
You probably won't surprise you when I say this. My brother and I we had an idea for a TV show, and it was like insect wars. But you'd imagine like you're just riding
what makes you think I'm not going to be surprised?
Imagine you're like riding a big bumblebee,
right? But
you're obviously tiny because that wouldn't work otherwise, would it?
Or it's a big bee.
Or it's a massive bee. Yeah. And you're just sort of flying through the grass, like this. And they would be like the bombers, wouldn't they? The bumblebees.
I'm thinking Star Wars here.
Yeah.
I think that scene
they would be like the Millennium Falcon of the thing. And then you've got honeybees, which would be your little kind of outriders. And you'd have like the bees versus, I don't know, locusts or something, or wasps or hornets or something.
You've really
whole TV. Yeah, we spent quite a lot of time.
I think a bumblebee
workshopping
is a big thing. It's a logo of Manchester, isn't it? The bee. They have the bee network and the bees, and Boddington's beer has got bee as a logo on it. Apparently symbolised the sort of industry of the people. Busy bees.
Okay, yeah, the busy bees.
Yeah, so we're getting a theme here. Busy bees in Wilmerdale.
It's also the name of a nursery.
It
busy
is.
Bees. I think my kids might have gone there at one point. They went to Farm Friends, actually.
The bee theme continues.
Well, a lot can be learnt from the bee, but again, that's another episode on Honey from the Hive.
The mythical
podcast coming soon.
Spin-off from the SME Growth Podcast.
Business Wisdom.
Business Wisdom. Okay, there's a link. Should we do a podcast about that?
Could do.
Okay, let's do it then. Hello and welcome to another episode of the SME Growth Podcast from Wellmeadow, not Honey from the Hive, as Richard keeps threatening to do. It's another episode from us where we try and come up with interesting and useful facts for owners and managers of small and medium-sized enterprises or businesses or organisations, whatever you want. And it's me and Rich again, us.
Back again.
Back in the room. And this topic this week got me, what's that quote from Harry Met Sally? You had me at hello. Got me on the heading, the title. I didn't even read all the show notes that had been prepared for us by our erstwhile researcher, which was you this week. The rise of the wisdom economy.
Yes.
I thought, that sounds interesting. What do you mean by that, Rich? And then you explained it, and I thought, that could be an interesting topic for discussion. So here we are. And it is. So what episode are we on now?
174.
So 174. Any wacky facts about this boring even number?
It's not going to be a prime number, is it?
An even number.
So...
What do the digits add up to? 12, so it's divisible by 3. But it's not a lot more you can say than that. Go on then, what was our last
At this point, I'm just wondering whether you've got any listeners left.
Only mathematicians.
Yeah.
And not very good ones, because they know all this stuff anyway.
Okay, so last 2 episodes, 171 was how your leadership style shapes your
so we covered off the
business
insights profiles as a kind of a prop for the discussion.
Yep.
And we talked about how that may be good or bad and what to be watchful for.
Indeed. 172 was AI tools to help your business scale, where we talked about HubSpot AI tools that are coming to
there's a strong
maturity
HubSpot theme to that, but in general, how can we use AI usefully and keep up with the latest thinking?
And then 173, prime number extraordinaire, was
it was
discussion around lonely founders. And this wasn't so much socially isolated entrepreneurs, but it's tough at the top.
It's tough at the top and in a way that damages the business, not just damages your well-being as the person at the top. So there's a few salutary lessons and topics for reflection in that one. I think it was a good one. And we mentioned a couple of times in that about wisdom and the fact that wisdom is a valuable commodity.
Increasingly so, I think.
And then that triggered the idea of a whole podcast on the topic. So put this into context for us then. Why have you chosen, what is wisdom in the context of our current age, and why is it so valuable?
Well, wisdom is a big topic for me personally. People might look. People are like, really, we wouldn't have thought that. No, I'm a big fan of the book of Proverbs in the Bible. There's a lot of wisdom in that. I read that on a very regular basis. Right. But there's a lot of wisdom in there. So wisdom is a very big thing that I'm always looking for. But I think it's a value that is very much overlooked nowadays. It's almost, if you say someone's wise, it's almost old-fashioned a little bit, isn't it?
Do you think it never used to be the case?
I think it's one of those things that's hard to identify sometimes, and I think in a society and culture that moves so fast, wisdom is something that moves quite slow.
Is that because wisdom is associated with age? Not always true, but it's broadly. And that in a fast-moving, dynamic, technologically driven society, age is seen as a hindrance because they're not early adopters. And therefore you throw away the baby with the bathwater.
I think there's that. I think there's also something around wisdom. I think wisdom's associated with age in a sense, but just because you've been through a number of cycles of things, you've seen stuff happen, you've got experience, you've got a mental map for how things work. That's not to say, there's young people can have wisdom as well. It's not an age-related thing so much, but more about a kind of how you just had those experiences and seen the world. So I think in a culture and in a society where new is always, we're very consumer focused. We're very, everything gets commoditized. Everything is now new. Anything that's a year old is obsolete and everything. When you're talking to someone saying, well, actually, you might need to wait 10 years to actually get some business wisdom, or, you look at how many people come on and give advice on Instagram or TikTok around business, and
they're in their 20s.
They're in the, still got no experience and things. I was going to say something then, but I thought I would say that. But
I think all the audience can insert their own.
I thought that wouldn't be probably very wise to say that, would it?
Yeah, well,
so that was wisdom in action. But we all know when you've been around someone who has been in business for a long time, they've just got stories, they've got context, they've got anecdotes, they've got they've got the experience of going, I wouldn't do that again.
And they can pluck an experience or a fact or an anecdote from memory rather than having to go and look it up. And then it doesn't have the same value, does it, if you're just regurgitating something you've got out of a chat.
And that when you speak to someone who, you look at and go, okay, either they're a mentor or they're someone you consider wise, and they just give you some advice and you go, actually, you've managed to cut through the fog in a way that other people couldn't.
Well, I think your point just now about having the mental map, the experience is a help, but it could take you 10 years gaining experience for something that somebody else could learn in an instant if it's been well internalized for them. And that mental map strikes me when you're talking about good leaders and what makes a good leader. You can't substitute the fact that they just got it all in their head. They can't go away and look it up, or they haven't got time to go and seek the counsel of their closest advisors. They have to have a lot of instinct. And that comes, I think, from a lot of this mental map. You can immediately see a situation, it fits into your worldview in a way that you are instinctively, you know how to react to that. And so many people, the vast majority of people, don't have very much of that for these complex situations.
I think that's it, because no two situations are ever going to be the same. So there's that ability to contextualize things. And there's a book called Strategic Intuition, which I think was written by William Duggan or Duggard. Probably got the name wrong there. And he talks about, like tactical expertise would be something around, like a firefighter goes into a situation and their training kicks in.
William Duggan,
that's it. So the training kicks in, they know exactly what to do. The team, everyone knows their roles. They go in, they do the job, they come out, and that. So there's a muscle memory almost in terms of that. But when you're getting into something that's more uncharted, so someone comes to you with a problem, this is the context, this is the situation, this is the resource, and you're going, right, I've never come across those variables before. However, I've come across similar situations. What he talks about in there is this kind of strategic intuition, which is having enough stuff in your head that you can then piece together. And he gives an example of Napoleon when the French were fighting the British, and they'd previously lost a lot on a kind of just traditional over-the-top lads, head-to-head, face-to-face combat type of thing, and they'd lost. And he knew that the British never wanted to be separated from the Navy. He also knew about some new cannons that had come in that had a longer range, and a couple of other bits of information. And he put that all together in a way to say, right, all we need to do to take that fort is to threaten to cut the British who are in it at the moment off from the Navy. Yeah. They will then leave the fort and we won't even have to fight them, because he just knew that they didn't want to be abandoned there type thing. So it's that sort of thing where I think wisdom comes to the fore, where you've got a lot of this context, ideas, but you've got to bring it together. And I think the knowledge piece is all there. So he had that knowledge, but his wisdom and insight was to be able to bring it all together for that specific context.
So some of it seems like it's risk-taking, but it's not. It's managed.
Yeah.
You're having to take decisions based on imperfect information, but you've got a better analogue. Yeah. You've got some metaphors and some experiences. I'm reminded of the story when whoever was piloting, I think it was Armstrong, but piloting the first lunar lander down to the lunar surface, and he had to take over the controls and move it sideways to where it was supposed to land, and they didn't have enough fuel left potentially, but he had to make this decision about either landing in a boulder-strewn, dangerous place to land, or taking the risk that you might run out of fuel to fly a bit further to the side and get out of the way, and landed with less than 10 seconds of fuel left. But you must have done so many test flights in the past on Earth that actually that was just an ordinary decision for him, even though no one else had ever landed on the moon before. So it's having that body of experience. But my point was that you don't necessarily have to have lived 50 years worth of running businesses to have that. You might have acquired a tremendous amount of wisdom in your early 20s, and by 25 you're wiser than most 50-year-olds. That's entirely possible.
Yeah, it's definitely not an age thing, although it does come with it. But the core idea around the rise of the wisdom economy is that, so industrial revolution, industrial age, clearly very labour dependent, so rewarded labour. As we get into the knowledge age, Web 2.0, that type of thing, more of the, I guess, service economy type of thing as well. That's information, so data, information, all of that was there. And then almost paradoxically, as we get into the AI age, which is almost the ultimate commoditization of knowledge, we enter into a situation where potentially wisdom is highly rewarded, because we have so much knowledge, because AI is making knowledge so ubiquitous and easy, and what used to be gated behind a law firm or an accountancy firm or a consulting firm or whatever, medical, you've now got at your fingertips.
What hooked me when I saw the title and that subtitle of it. And I'm reminded of the difference between data, information and knowledge. And people used to talk about that when we're doing KPIs and dashboards and so on. And having lots of data doesn't solve the problem. Sometimes it causes the problem. You then blinded. The signal to noise ratio drops, and you have to really search for what is relevant, and that becomes harder to do. So you turn the data into information, and that's where, as you say, in the knowledge age, that can be very useful. And now we've gone beyond that, where information turning into knowledge used to be a very human task. That's being automated. Because information was abundant ever since search engines have been around, which is the last 20 years or more. So even then, lawyers weren't threatened. You still needed lawyers because they had to apply their knowledge to all that information. You could still Google what's the law on this, but you still went to a lawyer to apply it for you. And now increasingly, that's less the case. Certainly in some areas of the law, which is a straightforward application of basic bits of law, you can get it to write a solicitor's letter for you. It's not a solicitor's letter, obviously, but it looks like one. And that's where we're getting to this point now, where if knowledge is put in the hands of everybody, or at least the illusion of knowledge, ChatGPT and its ilk come up with something that always looks interesting, persuasive. It may not be right, but it's always presented in a credible way, isn't it? You could believe it if you wanted to. You may make mistakes, but it gives everybody that illusion of, right, now I have that knowledge, what's left? And that's that overlay you were just talking about there, that wisdom to know the difference between something that looks good but isn't right.
Well, I think a good example of that, I'll give a personal example for us, is, and again, I think this is partly down to speed. So AI is almost making everybody speed up, right? So you can do stuff faster, you can do stuff faster. And we live in that culture where everything is soundbite, TikTok, whatever. So even with AI, so I was getting it to prompt a kind of proposal piece.
Yeah.
And so I prompted it pretty well because, again, that's another bit of skill, isn't it? How do you prompt?
Yep.
It came up with some output, which on the face of it, probably 8 out of 10 people would have gone, yeah, that's fine. And we actually had talked it through with people. And
I think more than 8 out of 10. It looked very credible. I saw it.
Because I then sat down and I thought, right, I'm just going to give myself some time to go through this and actually properly look at it and put myself in the position of the person on the other end receiving
you and I were
this.
talking about it, weren't we, in a real life context. Yeah.
And then as I went through it, I thought, do you know what? Actually, this could be a lot better had I just moved a couple of things around. But you needed the wisdom. I'm not saying like, look at me, I'm so wise, but just to illustrate this point, there's wisdom in taking time to stop and think: is this AI output actually doing the job that I'm intended it to do?
Yeah. Also,
then now I've got to apply it to context, and I can think of the emotional state that people are in a way that an AI never can't when we're going through, introducing a new piece of software or something like that. Change, for example.
Yeah.
And so there is that bit where, yes, there is this potential for a very powerful combination of AI tools, knowledge at your fingertips. All of this is there, but without having wisdom in your business to actually be able to understand the context of how it's applied, is a very dangerous place to be.
Is that laziness, or is it just too tempting? If a credible solution is being presented to you, it may be wrong, but is it just too tempting to accept it at face value because you're busy and you've got other stuff to move on? I'm talking generally now, not your example. I think maybe that is the point. And the other thing that struck me just as you were talking there as well, but when you use the words wisdom, you almost apologised. It's not as if I'm with. I think we've got to get away from this thought that wisdom is the preserve of Dumbledore and Yoda and these fictional characters with grey hair and hundreds of years of age in Yoda's case. It can be in a 5-year-old.
Oh yeah.
It can be in a young parent who has the second child and they realise from the experience of the first child.
But it's incredibly practical. Wisdom, if we're using back to my Proverbs thing, like every day, there's everyday practical. It's practical living is wisdom. In a sense, if you want to be
it's not something you should be embarrassed about or defend, is it? We all have
everyone
has
degrees of it, but it's understanding how to contextualize your knowledge or how to find a way through a situation. I mean, always the glib analogy of it, isn't it? It's like knowledge is knowing that tomato is a fruit, and wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. Yeah. It's kind of that sort of how do you contextualize it? But it is very practical. But I think what some of the stuff around the wisdom economy, which is still a very embryonic type of term, I think it's only really been around the last sort of 10, 15 years, and even then
as a wisdom economy phrase,
as a phrase. But there's that whole shift I talked about from industrial age, knowledge age, but there's 1 billion global knowledge workers. If you think about all of the law firms, technology firms, educators, there's an awful lot of people
who aren't operating machines and producing product
that work in a knowledge economy. And so there's some research by McKinsey that said that something like 30% of US work hours could be automated by 2030, which is only 4 years away. I mean, that's a huge amount, right?
Well, and even some of it now, it doesn't have to wait till 4 years away, does it? I saw some other studies saying that some fairly everyday jobs, salespeople and all sorts, not just the call centre workers, but large parts of their jobs are already. Well, we've always known there's a lot of admin involved and a lot of toing and froing in the job, even though it has a very sharp element of something that needs a human. But if you get up to 50, 60, 70, 80% of someone's job is all the fluff and admin around the core, then you think, well, hang on, if we could solve that, we only need a quarter of the number of people doing it. And then it starts getting really scary.
Well, Goldman Sachs reckon 300 million jobs globally at risk from AI, which, that's huge, isn't it? That's the population of America.
Yeah.
If you want to see what it looks like for a country that where nobody works, just come to the UK.
Oh, getting political.
Get political, sorry. But no. So there is this, I mean, one of the things we looked at as well was thinking about, the dumbing down of things, isn't it? So GPS.
Well, I saw these examples. Yeah.
So there's a danger here as well that we can, and as business owners, if we're too reliant upon this technology, I think there is a real need to step back and apply some wisdom to going, okay, well, how far should we go with AI?
Well, we've seen this happen before. And your example there, the GPS, just flesh that out, because what do you mean by that?
Well, I can remember when Mrs. Buckle was back in a sales job 20 years ago, she had a car full of maps. She knew where everything was. A to Z. She knew where to go and all that.
Yep.
Whereas now, I
wonder how many cars have got a road atlas even in them these days. Even more shockingly, perhaps, it's harder for us to, but our kids, can they use a road atlas in the way that we used to? They could learn it again, right? But they've not had to do it.
Well, I think I would be a terrible driver if I had to go back to a manual car with a road map. I'd be all over the place. Yeah. It'd be stressful.
It wasn't stressful when we were young, was it?
No.
That's just how it is. And if you needed to get to a certain street in a certain town a long way away, you'd at least worked out from your road atlas which roads do I need to take to get there, and you'll have a mental map of that. You wouldn't have to write it down. You think, I need to get to Bristol, right?
It's kind of...
On the Saturday, I'm going to go up the A21, around the M25, along the M4. When I get to a junction such as such, I'll come off there. Then I'll check my
Then I'll start checking
A to Z and start navigating by streets.
Yeah.
And you've got this map of how all the roads fit together. Yeah. And nowadays, I wonder, you hear old men talking in pubs about, oh, you mean the A362? Buy that phone box where you turn right and there's that nasty fork in the road. And they've got all this knowledge about the network, which doesn't exist anymore.
Whereas now you'd think, well, I listened to that. You'd probably describe the journey as what podcast you listen to.
Yeah, and you just arrive and you think, how did I get here?
Yeah.
So there's the GPS example. Calculators have taken away people's ability to do basic arithmetic. How many times you go into a shop? I did this once. I bought 2 items. One of them was 99p. And the shop assistant got a calculator out to add the price of the 2 things together. I think we've just added 99p onto another sum, whatever that other sum was. Yeah. It's quite easy to add 99p onto it, but they got the calculator out. So we've dumbed down with that. And even mobile phones with all of the memory of numbers in, we've had that for quite a long time now.
Yeah.
But I used to remember loads of phone numbers when I was young. And we don't. So, okay, we're not saying that we need to go back and fix those things, but if that's an analogue for what's happening, imagine if you get so used to using some of the AI tools now to do your brainstorming for you, or like you were describing just there, take all this information, meeting notes, call notes, emails, and produce a proposal for me. Whilst now we've been lauding that in previous episodes, isn't that great? That saves time. Wind the clock forward 5 years, you have lost the ability to write a proposal.
Yeah.
There's a skill in understanding what does the customer need, what can we provide, and how do we shape what we provide to meet their need. If you subcontract that to something else, you just lose the muscle memory. You stop doing it. So if you take that to the nth degree, what else do we lose the ability to do?
Yeah,
and that's where you're saying the bit that comes on as the overlay to that is both the wisdom to see that coming and to retain that ability.
Yeah.
Don't just subcontract all of your thinking.
And I think we touched on some of this. So you see it in sales. So if you do AI, and we've talked about AI prospecting, and there is a role for this. I'm not saying don't do any of these things, but I think you do it with your eyes open. There's a role for, sales, AI prospecting. Do you lose that out of your business? Mm-hmm. Marketing, AI can write all your content and make all your images. But do you then start to get weaker strategic thinking around marketing and segmentation?
We saw that image of a chessboard, didn't we? There were 2 kings on the same side, and they were on neighbouring squares, and they weren't even in the middle of the square.
And it was trying to position the company as strategic thinking. And it's like, well, anyone who knows chess can see that A, you can't have 3 kings on the chessboard, and B, those things couldn't be where they were. So, and that's lack of wisdom, right? Because the image. The fault of creating that image isn't AI's fault. That's how it's been prompted and then challenged. But the person who got it thought, that looks like a pretty picture. It looks like a chessboard to me. Use that. And they'd lost all wisdom to challenge it. So there's a real danger here that in using AI to make your business run faster, you actually start eroding the foundations and make it weaker. Yeah. And I think wisdom is the part of understanding where to draw that line. And some of it, we've talked before on the podcast about business continuity. It'd be an interesting one now to add into that mix to say, well, what does it look like if your business could no longer use AI? Yeah. Now, well, you mentioned that in the notes there about on the operations side. If we've automated so many processes that we've forgotten the fundamentals of how the process is supposed to work, we treat it like a black box. We put all these inputs in, which are probably automatically generated, and out pops the end, which works.
And we almost step back and think, well, isn't that great? We can just have more holidays now or do more things. And then, as you say, from a business continuity point of view, something changes. Or even not business continuity, the dynamics change. Yeah. Something means you need to now go and tweak the process, and the one you've built automatically doesn't adapt.
Yeah.
And it starts falling over.
And whilst it probably won't go away, there is that, there was I was listening to someone talk the other day saying OpenAI has had 300 billion invested into it or some crazy number, and they're making about 5 billion of revenue. Well, whilst 5 billion revenue is beyond the scope of most people, it's not if you're spending 300 billion to make 5 billion. No. Even GCSE maths students are going to be able to tell you that's not a good business model.
But as I pointed out, that's a pattern that's been repeated in the past, whether it be right back from transatlantic telephone cables.
Yeah.
And there, I guess, making your point about wisdom, that to be able to draw up and dredge up from your memory other examples of where this sort of thing has happened before, you don't have to be old to do that. You may have just have to have read a lot and looked at case studies. Yeah. But to know that this isn't the first time that someone has overinvested in a technology, gone bust, and the successors have made hay on the back of it.
So it's keeping that one eye on what's going on. So I guess there'll be certain businesses that win with this common this knowledge. And I think as well, this is probably, I don't know who this is encouraging for really. You hear a lot about the over 50s in the job market now, hard time for them, all this type of thing. The wisdom economy is really going to benefit those probably 45, 50 plus, because they've got the experience, they've got the wisdom, they've been there, seen it, got the t-shirt, they've done all that.
Yeah, as we've said though, it's not just a preserve of.
But it's not just preserve.
But there is a correlation.
Yeah.
And when you told me that earlier on, it did strike me as paradoxical that if the technology that's been built to create this situation has been built over the last 20 to 30 years, it's the same people that built it when they were younger who are now older and are maybe the survivors of the consequences of it. It's a really bizarre sort of wave you can imagine going through as that generation has got older.
Well, we actually had that project as well, didn't we? Well, not project, it didn't actually come off in the end, but we talked about it where there was some guy that was retiring who'd worked for 40 years in the company.
The German company.
And they wanted to say, well, how do we preserve all this knowledge? Because if you think someone who's worked in a company for 40 years, what's the investment that the company's made in someone?
I think it was a chemical plant somewhere up in the northwest, and they probably by a German company. If only that had happened 5 years later. Imagine what we could have done.
Yeah.
But they just wanted us to go and interview the person and write a book on his knowledge. But imagine what you could do now with AI around that.
I think it's a fantastic opportunity for that, for people to capture that knowledge. And even then where does it...
But hang on, back to your point though, have you lost the wisdom? You're going to bottle the knowledge, which is great, and then the successors will come along saying, well, what would Fred have said about this? You go into your virtual Fred, ask it the question, get the answer. You've not had to work that out for yourself. You've not really learned it. You've just been given the answer.
Well, you're capturing Fred's wisdom though, aren't you? You're getting Fred's wisdom.
But that's not imparting. You don't then receive the wisdom. You receive the answer. So if Fred is wrong, or the world has moved on, so that Fred's wisdom of the past, Fred would have been able to adapt, perhaps. Say, right, well, I used to use this combination of chemicals to do that, but I can now see that the grade of chemical coming in from the importer is slightly different, so I would tweak it like this. That he could adapt. Maybe the model was frozen in the past, couldn't.
Yeah.
So the people receiving the answers are back to that black box thing. I don't know how it works. It just produces an answer. Oh, but the answer's wrong. Yeah, but I don't know how. So
but then what if Fred then is able to say, maybe it's not a static thing. Fred says, right, I'm going to update this with my own knowledge. You send me the problems in, I'll update the AI. Yeah. Fred's licensing that technology back to the company.
Well, it's all right. Well, Fred's still around with us, right? But if this is designed to outlive Fred's
making bank. But it's interesting. I think it just opens up. It's an interesting discussion, isn't it? Where does this wisdom economy is?
So what's the warning that we're trying to say here? That whilst the temptation is to subcontract lots of our low-level admin-y, routine-y, researchy tasks, and even to go beyond that and do some of the more advanced, quote-unquote, thinking and reasoning, are we saying that every now and again do it yourself? A bit like a pilot could use autopilot all the time, but every now and again, part of the training, I believe, means that they have to manually fly the plane for a leg just to keep in practice and go back into the simulator and do that stuff. Because you could just fly everything on autopilot all the time. And then when the emergency happens...
I think we talked about this recently, haven't we? About going back to the tools, undercover boss type of thing.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah.
Sometimes it's worth going back to do a process manually.
Yeah.
Where you've tried to speed things up, you've tried to do that, and we're not knocking efficiency and trying to drive efficiency and things. But you can, with all these things, they're a pendulum, aren't they? The risk of the pendulum over swinging on the AI is that you really de-skill, and when that pendulum swings back, all of a sudden you go, well, we now haven't got the skills in house. We haven't got.
There'll be a market for that, and maybe that's the point you're trying to make. That there is positive news in this. There's a client we had which solely relied on the fact that they had on their team people who are old enough to remember what the old BT equipment worked like, the old Marconi electronics in the 80s, how it worked, because it still exists. And there's so many telephone exchanges around the world built on this old tech that you can't just turn them off and put them somewhere else, because there's all blue light services and defense stuff and really sensitive things happening. And so they're stuck with this old tech, and there's a diminishing pool of people that know how to service it. So if you are one of those people, there's a business to be made. So don't throw away those old skills.
Yeah.
Just like people who could service typewriters, or in the future, maybe mechanics who can keep a combustion engine running because everybody's gone electric. There is still a value in some of these old skills.
Indeed. So I think what businesses can do is think about your AI. Don't just go full bore on it. Make sure you understand why you're using it and where the risks are around that. That would be wise.
Yep.
Remember that business is fundamentally a relational thing.
Yep.
Particularly at the SME level, there's not even transactions can be relational. And we've talked about that on the podcast before as well. Customer service, customer success type of things. So making sure we're building human capacity. What are you doing with your apprentices? What are you doing with your how are the older and younger people learning off each other and that type of thing. We've talked about data and stuff as well, fixing that operations side of things. Again, it's kind of...
Maybe it's just as we go through, keep your eyes open to this risk.
Yeah.
And now is the analog that we should try and navigate a journey without the GPS. Nobody does that, right? But if you're worried about the GPS being turned off one day, you've got to keep those skills. Now, maybe the equivalent is do something else in your, go walking and navigate through the hills using an OS map or something. You still have some navigational ability. You just turn it into a different arena. So maybe we just need to be aware that if we're not careful, we'll dumb down so much our human knowledge because we've subcontracted it to machines. So don't let that happen. Keep in touch.
If we lose the ability to apply the knowledge in the right context, we've lost wisdom. So I think the wisdom economy then is maintaining those skills, like bushcraft, like cooking from scratch, like all these things where we've thrown them away in this spirit of consumerism and convenience. Actually, sometimes it's going back to the basics and applying that wisdom, not only personally but at a business level as well, will reap long-term dividends. That's the soundbite, isn't it? Put that in the clip.
Here endeth the lesson. I'm into that. Very good. Good topic, actually, that.
Yeah, that's one to think about, isn't it?
Wisdom economy. There you go. Stay tuned. I think you might be hearing more about that. And maybe it's a bit of an antidote, or at least a controlling a break on some of the other discussions where we probably come across as very early adopting and keen on AI. Good.
There we go.
Thank you very much. Thank you again for listening to another episode of the SME Growth Podcast. Tell your friends, tell them in the pub, and good luck with your business.